to another episode of Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am Sean Farrell. God is great all the time. All the time, God is great. Jesus Christ died and he rose again. Let's get into it. So, I was watching something on I was watching something this past last week, and I saw something that I never saw before, and it was a video on the Pistons of the 90s, okay, and it was a video on the implosion of the Pistons in the 90s, okay, and I saw it on a channel called The Base. Okay, it's called the Base. Usually it has topics on the downfall of the Knicks, the downfall of the Bulls, downfall of the Clippers, yada yada yada. They do several great videos, and the stuff that I learned about the Pistons in the early 90s, and that's what led to his topic right here: the implosion of the 90s Pistons. Okay, the implosion of the 90s Pistons, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay, so after winning their second straight championship in 1990, injuries, age caught up to the Pistons in 1991. Okay, it was clear as day. All right, so and they actually started the season 9-2. Okay, they started the season 9-2, but Lambert had some facial fractures he suffered in the preseason. Isiah Thomas ruptured a tear duct. Dennis Rodman had an ankle injury to start the season. And then the Pistons were struggling getting things going. Then, just as they were getting things going, Isiah Thomas hurt his wrist, and then he was out for 34 games. Okay, so yeah, so still they managed to finish 15-32, get past the Hawks, the Celtics before being swept by the Bulls, and so the demolition began after the 1991 season. Okay. They released Vinnie Johnson, okay, and they released James Edwards too. And so they replaced Vinnie Johnson with Darryl Walker, okay, and they released James Edwards because they thought that they had a better player than James Edwards on the roster. Guess who that player was? Still can't guess it? Okay. They thought that William I'm sorry. I'm so hard for a chuckle. They thought that William Bedford was going to be better than James Edwards. And in case you didn't hear me, let me say it again. They thought William Bedford was going to be better than James Edwards. So the Pistons, or Jack McClosky, foolishly thought that William Bedford was going to be better than James Edwards, who had been around the league for a long time, okay? And William Bedford has some drug issues, okay, that he was just coming back from. And so Jack McClosky thought that William Bedford could replace James Edwards, okay? Right? I know it sounds silly, right? But that's what Jack McClosky thought at that time, okay? Jack McClosky said this: if I can help rehabilitate this guy, and he's talking about William Bedford, if I can help rehabilitate this guy and he becomes the person we'd like him to be, that we might win for another 3 to 4 years. Okay. Jack McClosky said, if I can help rehabilitate this guy and he becomes the person we'd like him to be, that we might win for another 3 to 4 years. That's how much confidence Jack McClosky had in William Bedford replacing James Edwards, right? But the veteran Pistons who had been there, like Isiah Thomas, I think they knew the truth, okay? Isiah Thomas said this. Isiah Thomas said, I don't want to discuss William Bedford. Anything to do with Bedford is a waste of my time. I'm not in his corner anymore. Not everyone deserves to wear Pistons across his chest. That's what Isiah Thomas said about William Bedford. Yeah. And other Pistons like Dennis Rodman said that William Bedford needed to grow up or whatnot. But John Salley says that William Bedford was one of his favorite teammates. Okay. John Salley said William Bedford was one of his favorite teammates, right? But according to Isiah Thomas, he didn't want to discuss William Bedford. So Isiah Thomas and other Pistons knew the truth about William Bedford. Okay. The 1992 season came, right? And it was a different team, different players, and obviously a different feel, right? So for the 1992 season, they went out and signed Orlando Woolrich, okay? And see, the core was still there for the 1992 season, okay? The core was still there. Mark Aguirre was still there. Joe Dumars, Bill Laimbeer, Rodman, Salley, Gerald Henderson, Lance Blanks, and William Bedford were there, okay? They were still there. But gone were Tree Rollins, Scott Hastings, who got traded to the Denver Nuggets for Orlando Woolrich. And Woolrich averaged 25.1 points per game, okay, in the 1990-91 season for the Denver Nuggets. But I would encourage you to go look at that system that Paul Westhead ran, okay, that enabled Orlando Woolrich to average 25 points per game, okay. Those numbers were pretty much inflated, okay. Those numbers were inflated. But Tree Rollins, Scott Hastings, James Edwards, Vinnie Johnson, and John Long were all gone. And they were replaced by players like Bob McCann, Charles Thomas, Brad Sellers, Orlando Woolrich, Darrell Walker, right? Okay. And so Bill Laimbeer said this at one point during the 1992 season because Billy McKinney had taken over as GM of the Pistons, okay? Bill Laimbeer said this at one point during the 1992 season. Our organization has deteriorated to the point where it's very... I butchered that. Let me start that over. Bill Laimbeer said, our organization has deteriorated to the point where it is every man for himself. And Dennis Rodman said at one point during the season, the saddest part is we're not a team. Okay. So they finished 48-34, right? They finished 48-34 and still made the playoffs, lost to the New York Knicks in 5 games. And apparently, Bill and Beer made some critical comments, okay? Bill and Beer made some critical comments about Jack McClosky and the moves that he made. Basically, Lambeer said that Jack McClosky had basically destroyed the Pistons' family structure, the family structure that the Detroit Pistons had built. He blamed Jack McClosky for that. Okay, and apparently Jack McClosky was hurt by Bill Lambeer's comments, and so after the season, the implosion continued. Right, Chuck Daly retired. Jack McClosky went on to the Minnesota Timberwolves, believe it or not. And Dennis Rodman said he would not play for another coach other than Chuck Daly. Okay? That's what Dennis Rodman said. And there was some talk of him when Chuck Daly unretired and coached the New Jersey Nets. There was some talk of Dennis Rodman joining the New Jersey Nets. Because remember, Rodman said he didn't want to play for anybody else than Chuck Daly. Okay. And Ron Rothstein was a new head coach of the Pistons. He had been a Pistons assistant under Daly in the 1980s. Then he coached the Miami Heat for a few years. Now he is back as coach of the Detroit Pistons. Okay. And so there was talk of Rodman going to the New Jersey Nets, but that never materialized. So they finished 40 and 42 in 1993. Okay. And so one of the lowlights of the season was a loss to the Dallas Mavericks, right? A team that finished the 1993 season 11-71. Let me hear that again. They lost to the Dallas Mavericks. They lost to the Dallas Mavericks 113-103. And the sad part about it is the Dallas Mavericks were 3-30 at the time. The Dallas Mavericks were 3-30 at that time. And they lost by 10 to the Dallas Mavericks. That was one of the lowlights of the season. Okay. And so they brought in Terry Mills and Olden Polynice and Alvin Robertson for the 1993 season. Okay. The core was still there. But I'll say they made the Pistons, this is part of the Pistons implosion right here. They traded John Salley to the Miami Heat, okay, for a couple of draft picks, okay. One of those draft picks turned out to be a guy by the name of Isiah Morris, okay. Now, none of y'all may know who Isiah Morris is, but needless to say, he did not work out, okay. I know who Isiah Morris is because I have his basketball card. Okay. I know who Isiah Morris is because I have his rookie card. Okay. But yeah, they traded John Salley to the Miami Heat for a couple of draft picks, which turned out to be Isiah Morris. And boy, did that not ever work out. They traded William Bedford to the Clippers too. Okay. They traded William Bedford to the Clippers for Olden Polynice, right? And so this is when we began to see Dennis Rodman become Dennis Rodman, if you know what I mean. Because during the training camp for the 1992-93 season, he refused to come to camp or the preseason games, but it was said that he did sit in the stands. Okay. He did sit in the stands and watch the games, right? So they started off the season 2-9. And at one point they were 19-27. And I said they finished 40 and 42 and missed the playoffs. Okay, and there was talk of mutiny among the team. Okay, and it was said, and teammates were complaining that, no. Okay, so Rodman was injured um, at the start of the season. He had a knee injury. Okay, then he came back in November, right? But by February, he said he had a calf injury. But um, there were some teammates who said that he was faking his calf injury, and he was 100% healthy, and he could play. Okay, and this is the season where he was found sleeping in the parking lot of the Detroit Pistons arena with a gun in his truck. Okay, and so yeah, there was some talk that he was going to end his life by suicide or whatnot, but he was found sleeping in the Pistons parking lot with a gun in his truck. Okay, yeah, so not only were the Pistons imploding, but Dennis Rodman was imploding too. Billy McKinney, the Pistons GM, said, Dennis has made it clear that he doesn't want to be here. When we find the right deal, we'll move him. If not, he can just stay here until he rots. Well, what do you know? Who knew that he would rot? Okay? And that's a pretty strong statement, okay? That's a pretty strong statement. If not, he can stay here until he rots. That's a pretty strong statement coming from the GM. And they finally moved him in the offseason. Traded him to the San Antonio Spurs for Sean Elliott and David Wood. Okay? And so the 1994 season comes. Okay? And okay. No. Okay. So 1994 season comes, right? And it's training camp. Bill Laimbeer sets a hard screen on Isiah Thomas. And Isiah Thomas had a broken rib. And he wanted to swing at Bill Laimbeer. But Isiah Thomas had broken his rib that he couldn't swing. And so I guess Isiah Thomas let it go at that point. Okay. However, there was another practice. Okay. There was another practice. And Bill Laimbeer talked about this at the end of the Bad Boys documentary, right? There was another practice that was had. Okay. And Bill Laimbeer set another hard screen on Isiah Thomas. And this time, Isiah Thomas didn't hold back. He took a swing at Bill Laimbeer. Okay. And Bill Laimbeer's head must have been made of steel. Okay. Bill Laimbeer's head must have been made of Terminator steel. Okay. Because Isiah Thomas swung at him. But Isiah Thomas broke his hand too. Okay. And Bill Laimbeer talked about this at the end of the Bad Boys documentary. He said, I set a hard screen on Isiah and took a swing at me, broke his hand, unfortunately. But Bill Laimbeer must have had Terminator steel head. Okay? He must have had a Terminator steel head. Because if you break your hand punching somebody, and you got to have one hard head. You got to have like a bulletproof head, almost, right? But yeah, and then coincidence, I think not. After the fight with Bill Laimbeer retired 6 games later. Okay, so and it was said that. Oh no. Well, okay, I didn't get into that. Okay, and so Alvin Robertson. Okay, this was the original Sprewell choke. Okay, this was the original Sprewell. Only that his time, it wasn't the coach who got choked. It was the GM, Billy McKinney. And Alvin Robertson got suspended for choking Billy McKinney, the GM. And so he got suspended indefinitely and never came back. And it was said that the Pistons, the official bad boy Pistons era ended when Joe Dumars retired in 1999. Okay. That's when they say the official end of the bad boys era, because Joe Dumars was the only one around. Okay. And yeah, he was the only player around who was there in the prime of Isiah Thomas, Dennis Rodman, Bill Laimbeer, and saw prime and played with prime Grant Hill. Okay. Yeah, Joe Dumars was there that long. And they say that was the official end of the bad boys era when Joe Dumars retired after the 1999 season. Okay. Yeah, so. But I think the end of the bad boys era came when they switched to those brand new uniforms in 1996. Okay. After the 1996 season, they switched to the new uniforms. I think that's when the bad boy Pistons era was over, when they switched to those new uniforms. Okay. But yeah, Terry Forholster was a pretty good reporter who covered the Pistons. And Terry Forholster said, if the rise was ugly, then the breakup had to be just as ugly. I mean, there was just no good way to end the bad boys era. Okay. Yeah, so the rise was ugly and the implosion was even uglier. Okay. The implosion or the breakup, as you want to call it. Okay. All right. That's it. And that's all for Throwing It Back with Sean Farrell. I am out of here. Peace out.